Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Around the Ballpark podcast. We got two mics here tonight. Myself, Mike Redmond, the host of the Around the Ballpark podcast. Darren is still unavailable this evening. Hopes to be back this Sunday night as we talk about the Cleveland Browns. So looking forward to that. But tonight, our guest of honor is Mike. We've had him on once before on the recording. Tonight, though, we are live. Mike, of course, is with Seinfeld Scholars. Mike, so thankful that you're joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me, Mike. It's always talking to another Mike and always a little stumble on the tongue.
Yeah, that's okay. We will make it work. And so as people are jumping on, just kind of shot all that out there. Thank you. This is the first time we've done a live on a Friday night. So I'm excited to see what's going to happen with that. I know there's so many options you can have. So those of you that do jump on, thank you for being with us. And as we've mentioned on this show before, this is the Around the Ballpark podcast. So while the majority of our material is related to baseball, football, other sports of that nature, we enjoy to talk about other items along the way to and from the park. So that's what we are doing here tonight. And tonight we are going to talk all things Seinfeld, specifically food-related episodes. And those of you that watched the original podcast that we had, we covered the baseball side of things. So tonight we're going to have a little bit of fun with that. So I see a few of you starting to jump on. Thanks for being on with us. So before we kind of introduce Mike once more to those that may have not got to see us before, I want to go ahead and first and foremost thank our sponsor, Nashville Tax Solutions, and Christopher Bennett and his team. And, you know, Christopher Bennett, a great friend of mine, he's actually going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers game this weekend. He has season passes for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They had a great start this year, starting to slip a little bit, but have a favorable schedule coming up here pretty soon. I still believe they have 2 games left with Carolina Panthers, so that's 2 more wins on the docket, I'm sure, for Tampa Bay. But with that said, those folks at Nashville Tax Solutions in Palm Bay, Florida, where the ocean meets the sky, there is a place where tax worries meet their end. And whether you need to file years of missing returns, a current year return, or you might need just relief from a tax lien or levy, Nashville Tax Solutions has the solution for you. And at Nashville Tax Solutions, they are your trusted partner in the tax resolution industry. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. They understand the stress, the confusion that tax problems can bring. That's why we're here to offer clarity, relief, and peace of mind. Had the pleasure of working with Christopher Bennett personally, and the owner of Nashville Tax Solutions, and his knowledge and expertise in tax matters is truly impressive. He was able to provide clear and concise explanations, ensuring that I fully understood the process and the best course of action for my situation. Chris's professionalism and attention to detail were evident throughout our interactions, and I felt confident every step of the way. And Nashville Tax Solutions saved me from a financial nightmare. They can do the same for you. They're not just the experts in tax resolution. They are compassionate too. So don't let tax problems weigh you down. Contact Nashville Tax Solutions today and let them guide you towards a brighter financial future. Their phone number, you may ask, 615-502-2250. Check out their website at nashvilletaxsolutions.com or send them an email to info@NashvilleTaxSolutions, where tax resolution is achieved. And one final shout out to Christopher Bennett. We had a recent podcast here on about the 16th annual Family Christmas Extravaganza. Christopher will be a partner of that event as well. Super excited to see you out there. Mike, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that event, but basically here in Brevard County, Florida, once a year, we give Christmas away for free to the community. So we basically, there's no charge for the entire event. We've had over 25,000 people came out last year. An awesome opportunity. Food is provided, bounce house, rock wall climbing, face painting, entertainment. We're having entertainers come in. We're doing an America's Got Talent type event called Extravaganza's Got Talent. Just an awesome way to bless families this year, 4 days before Christmas. So I look forward to that event every single year, the impact that it makes on the community. And it's a day where we can tell our children, hey, leave the tablets, leave the phones at home. We're going to go out and have a good time without technology for once, like we used to do back in the day, especially around the days of Seinfeld that we're going to get into here. So, and I love that you're rocking the Minnesota t-shirt. So Mike, if you wouldn't mind, just, I know we've had you on once before many months ago, but if you wouldn't mind just letting our live viewers know a little bit about yourself, who you are, and how Seinfeld Scholars kind of got started.
Yeah, you bet. My name is Mike. Big Seinfeld fan, have been since I was 14 years old, which is 31 years ago, which is a scary thought. But the show has been around a long time. It's given us a lot of laughs and joy for decades. And happy to have a nice following over on Twitter, or X if you prefer, where we do annual episode brackets and kind of different formats, so we can kind of pit episodes against each other. That's kind of our favorite way to kind of celebrate the series, is looking at it at an episodic level. And we do some other projects on the side as well. Right now, we're kind of jumping through every episode and looking to see what was the best title option for that episode. Was it the original title, or was it something else? So, but anything in the Seinfeld realm is great. Talking about food tonight, honestly, if you'd said the topic was like household cleaning accessories in Seinfeld, I'd be like, hey, let's talk about that. Sounds great. Let's talk about that too. So anything yes. Seinfeld sounds great to me.
Yeah, and I hope, I guess we could technically call the baseball episodes part 1, and this would be part 2, I guess you could sure. say. But hopefully others to come down the line, because there's still so much. I don't think there's been a night that has gone by where I haven't had at least 2 episodes on. It's the perfect evening show for me, just to kind of unwind. You don't want something too serious, or something that you're going to, you're going to realize, oh, it's been an hour and a half. I should have been in bed, 30 minutes ago. So it's a perfect show for that. And especially on the weekends as well, if you're just looking to relax and unwind after a stressful week. But we all have different reasons why we watch the show. So let's dive into it. And again, those of you that are jumping on, thank you for being here. Just go ahead in the chat, throw any questions you have up, thumbs up, those sorts of things. Just subscribe, share if you haven't already. Appreciate that. So let's go ahead, and there's so many areas we can go here, but we're going to talk about food related episodes. So let's start first and foremost with the episode, The Cafe. So a little backstory on that one. That is where Jerry becomes fascinated with the failing restaurant. It's called the Dream Cafe, with Babu Bot is his name. And he tries to convince Babu, because it wasn't doing very well, let's put it that way. Not much business outside of Jerry. So he convinces Babu to turn it into a Pakistani restaurant. So there's that whole situation going on, and changing the entire menu. And then on the other side of things, but what makes this episode so great, and this is where I would like for you to start, Mike, is with all that goodness, there's also another side which might even overshadow that, and which is related to George. This is the episode where he asks Elaine to take an IQ test for him, and everything kind of unwinds from there. So feel free to, let's just jump into this one, your initial thoughts and where you stand on that.
Yeah, I feel like the cafe has one of my favorite all-time George scenes, and everybody knows what I'm talking about. Of course, it's the scene where Elaine delivers him the test after she has taken the test at the Dream Cafe and had Kramer go wild around her and spill all sorts of stuff all over the test. So George is left to explain what has happened to this test to his girlfriend, who is, I believe, a grad student or something in the episode, and that's why he's taking the test in the first place. But he just kind of matter-of-factly just kind of rolls with it, like she's like, "What happened to the test?" "Well, what? I spilled some food on it." "Food? Yeah. Where'd you get food?" It was total George Costanza, just vintage George Costanza, just on display. Just, what do you want? It was almost like in the same realm of, was that wrong, from the episode where he gets fired for with a cleaning woman in the office. So it was kind of that vibe, but it was just unbelievable, just to watch it unfold. Just it's like a 2-minute scene where George is just like, I don't care what she does, how she interrogates me, how illogical this seems. I'm sticking with my story. That's just how it's going to go.
I'm staying in this room, and you're not going to disturb me, and I'm going to get this done. It was great, and oftentimes it's more than just the punchline, right? It's the facial mannerism, it's the way it gets delivered. You think back to that, kind of going back for a minute into the actual cafe itself, with the really hot towels and that caused the whole mess in the first place. Just the face reactions and whatnot, and then just Jerry's just laissez-faire attitude in terms of what he's going to order, and just it was just awesome. And I love how they incorporated everyone into it. And then the poor guy, shuts the whole thing down, like we talked about, tries to rebuild, and nobody comes. And, and I love the fact that, and that's probably another area that we'll eventually get to. I love the recurring characters. You kind of look at a show like this, and you have your main cast, and then you have your, B, or next level, but then the recurring, sometimes they find the perfect spots to bring them in. And this episode, to me, is definitely very high on most people's list. And Marianne, thanks for joining us. Yes, we see all your other chats, and feel free if you have any questions or comments about the episodes that we're talking about to throw in the chat. But this particular episode, too, and unfortunately, everything unwinded the way they did, and as we mentioned, Elaine gets caught at the end, and how do you get out of that, right? Like how do you de-escalate that situation? You're kind of caught red-handed there. Just an awesome episode to start with, and really set the bar high for. And do you remember what season that was out of? I don't have that.
Yeah, that's a season 3 episode. Relatively early in season 3. It was really around that time when the show was really finding its, I'm not going to say it's full stride, but felt like more of the show that it would eventually become, in terms of like the pacing. That to me is a big thing when you watch the first couple seasons compared to the later seasons. The pacing really picks up, and you talk about character development. We can go back and forth on whether character development was ever necessary anyway, but it felt like the editing and the pacing kind of really picked up, and they figured out how to do it in season 3, in my mind anyway.
Yes, and the other thing because I believe, now we all know season 1 was just like a tease, like it was just a couple episodes, and you wish that, I always, to this day, I'm like, I wish they were to record just a few episodes, just left them in the vault and then release. Like, I still feel to this day, like if a show could catch fire, just record a few episodes, put it in a vault somewhere, and surprise everybody 10 years from now and release one every once in a while. That would be amazing.
That would be amazing.
I still hold out hope that maybe one day we'll get it. But so jumping next, so many other avenues we can go to, but we got to talk about the big salad, not just any salad. We got to talk about the big salad. So if you want to kind of describe to listeners that I'm sure anyone that's watched Seinfeld, you got to know about this episode, but kind of share your thoughts on that whole experience, because another top 10 episode for sure.
Yeah, and you talk about an episode getting just incredible mileage out of such a simple little thing. That is like the quintessential example. You start off with George kind of looking almost confused, like, what is she talking about? The big salad. I've never heard of this thing. And Jerry, of course, in his Jerry way, big lettuce, big carrots, tomatoes like volleyballs, and letting us know what's in it there. But it, again, it goes back to George. So many episodes, of course, go back to George, but his reaction to his girlfriend Julie handing Elaine this bag and sort of accepting the thank you for it, even though he paid for it. Just to blow that up into a whole premise of an episode, that moment, that's Seinfeld for you right there.
Yeah, and how sad was that other diner? Like, it was just like gloom and doom, like bare minimum. Just he looks so just not a place you would ever want to step foot into. And I think that was the whole point. But man, that place just looked desolate, like an abandoned diner in the middle of like stretches of land on 95 or I-95 or something, where you just can't find anything, and you just find this poor little diner with no no, but so another thing that we have to talk about too, we're going to kind of go through some of these quickly with time and stuff like that, but like I said, feel free to any questions, throw them in the chat. So we got to talk about the whole with the rye. So again, here I'll start this one, but this is again where George tries to prevent I guess you'd call it a feud with his parents and Susan's parents, just because of this loaf of rye bread. And after the parents take back the bread, George tries to make the parents, I guess, get back under their good graces by taking them on a horse tour. And then that whole thing develops. Not just, so you look at that aspect alone, also, with what happened with Kramer feeding the horse. What was that again? The
Beefarino.
Beefarino, yeah. Cans and cans of one big can of Beefarino. But that's all that needed to be done. The damage was done pretty quickly in the rye. They didn't get very far. And so, of course, if you want to kind of jump in from here, and then how that escalates into them not putting the rye bread out, and and then the whole trying to sneak it in and all that stuff. So if you want to kind of jump in there, because that's another element to this beautiful, beautiful episode.
Yeah. Of course, the episode begins. You have no idea what consequences are going to be from Kramer joining this price club to buy all these giant packages of food. And I think Jerry's holding up like a star kissed and makes some sort of comment about it feeding the biosphere or something, or stocking up the biosphere. So the Beefarino is definitely one of the famous things that came out of that episode. A lot of people remember that instantly in terms of Kramer feeding that. Of course, when Mr. Ross, George's future father-in-law, asked him, "What do you feed this animal?" "Well, oats and hay. Yeah, they really like that stuff."
Yeah, sure. And it's funny how the mind works, because we actually we were able to go on a cruise recently to Coco Cay, Bahamas, and we went to Nassau. And so we were in Nassau and we were looking for transportation because we started walking and we realized we really shouldn't have. So let's try to find, and we found a horse and buggy, and that's where I went. Like, I didn't think, oh, this would be fun. I went to the Beefaroni. I went to the episode, like it was there. That's what happened. That's where my mind went. But probably won't go back to Nassau. I love Bahamas is nice. Nassau, if you haven't been, if you're going to go on a cruise, that's more of a tourist trap. Stay on the boat, have fun, less people on the boat, enjoy it. But I digress. So moving on from there, that episode, again, awesome. We have to talk also about the Chinese restaurant next. And so Seinfeld 4, I'm not pronouncing it correctly, but so in this episode, really it's beautiful because it really just takes, like, they're able to make an entire episode basically staying within the Chinese restaurant, but they have so many ongoing parts. Of course, George losing his mind, trying to use the phone to make a phone call, to make sure his date's going to be there, and that whole mess, and then sitting everybody. So give the listeners a little bit of taste on that episode and some things that transpired there, because there's just so much to unpack here with that episode.
Yeah, super famous season 2 episode with no Kramer. Of course, it's just Jerry, George, and Elaine at the restaurant waiting for a table. And Elaine is, in my mind, is the funniest part of that episode because she is the hungriest. In fact, she suggests that at one point that it shouldn't be based on should be based on who gets there first. It should be based on who's hungriest in terms of the seating situation. But I think one of my favorite parts of the episode is, again, food related. They're in a restaurant, but Jerry offering Elaine $50 to go and take an egg roll off a table and eat it in front of the people at the table, and her kind of going over there and just kind of almost like a ventriloquist trying to talk without moving her mouth and bribe them into handing over one of the egg rolls, like for $20 or something like that.
So $20 right now. So I got to ask you this question. It's kind of fun. Let's have a little fun with it. So, yeah, knowing the show as well as you do, and as well as I do. So we know what Elaine, like, I think we all knew what Elaine, that she wasn't going to do it. But like, if you put Now Kramer wasn't in the episode, but if you insert Kramer here, now I feel like not only would he have had the egg roll, he would have found a way to have wonton soup. He would have had kung pao. He would have had a feast for $50. But you think that George would take that same deal, and if he wasn't losing his mind already, do you think he would have actually partaken of the egg roll, or do you think he would have chickened out?
I have to assume that he would have done it, because his literal line when Elaine asks him, "Should I do it, George?" he says, "For $50, I put my face in their soup and blow." So I'm guessing if he meant it, then he'd definitely have no problem going and grabbing the egg roll.
Right, and I say that because like there's a lot of episodes throughout the show where his bark is louder than his bite, right? Like with the red sweatshirt, he's I'm gonna say this when I get there, and then of course forget it. He's carrying her bags and says nothing of the sorts. But but in that episode too, you have regulars that come in that don't have to wait a minute and get sat down right away. And of course the whole joke is people have been there shorter time, they're getting a seat, and then I've never actually tried to do that, like where I've tried to hand money over to somebody to try to get something a little bit sooner. But just the comedy gold that was that episode. And unfortunately, I believe it was Outer Space Plan 9 from Outer Space. I think it was. They did not get to make the movie because of the crowded restaurant, and so it didn't work out. And of course, show ends, they leave the restaurant, and then finally they get called. But at that point, it's big miss there. So jumping into now what is my I wouldn't call it my all-time favorite episode, but my all-time favorite scene, bar none, there's not even a second place, is the Kenny Rogers Roasters episode. The scene where Kramer opens the door with the red light shining in, and he kind of falls backwards into this pose. And I kid you, like I remember the first time seeing, because as much of a fan as I was, I blew the show off for so many years. I was always a Friends guy. Still am. I love Friends. But I finally gave Seinfeld a chance a couple of years back and not turned back since. And that scene, no matter how many, like I can't watch it once. Like I always have to rewind, find the Roku remote every single time it's on to see that scene 3 or 4 times. I don't know why, but it gets me every single time. But so would you mind just kind of sharing about that episode beyond that beautiful part? What you loved about that, and the kind of backstory of what Kenny Rogers Roasters actually is and was and represented and all that.
Yeah, real inspired choices by the production crew with the red lights and everything they did with that. It was very well done, especially for that era of the show. It kind of leaned right into the type of comedy they were doing at that time, and it was obviously hilarious. But it'd be interesting for me to know like what kind of direction Michael Richards was given in terms of when he's eating the chicken in Jerry's apartment, because he's sitting there in Jerry's bed and he's just like tossing chicken skin around and just eating this thing as messily as possible, and he's like bouncing against the headboard.
Yeah,
just this bizarrely hysterical scenes with him eating the chicken is so good.
Yeah, really, really was. And and because with Newman too, what he brought to that episode, with just like you said, like with everything in terms of and then just the visual of Kramer enjoying this chicken on what was a waterbed, right? Like just going to town, trying to hide it. And then of course the beauty is, wait a minute, broccoli, you can't stand broccoli, and that whole mess. Like just top to bottom, it's in my top 5 for sure. Not total all-time best episode, but parts of that brought it up very high, because and I love the fact that Jerry goes next door, right? Like it seemed like he went next door like very easy. Like the way Jerry's character is throughout the show, like that's not a move that Jerry would make, but for whatever reason this episode he was game to sleep next door with the shiny lights. Like I don't quite know why he agreed to this. But yeah,
it was one of those things. If you go back through the history, it was more of an early season Jerry move to kind of be the nice guy and be understanding and kind of, all right, this situation stinks, but I gotta tough it out, sort of thing. Like when they're waiting for Elaine to show up with George's father, or Elaine's father, and Elaine's father scaring them. It seemed like a situation where a later season Jerry would have just left, but an early season Jerry stays. Well, but here in season 8, okay, Jerry's concerned about this friend of his who he's cost him his job by telling him to skip a meeting and come out to dinner, and now he's gonna change apartments to keep him at a job at a fast food place. Yeah, it was a stretch, but we can allow the sitcom world to stretch the bounds of reality from time to time.
Yes, and the stress. What was the line he delivered? The when he, yeah, I'm stressed or something like to that regard.
Oh, I'm stressed.
Yeah, yes. Got the hand. Yes, exactly. Pulled that off right. Yep. So, and now you mentioned earlier one episode that Kramer was not involved in was Chinese restaurant, but one episode he did have a big part in. Let's talk about the non-fat yogurt. The whole premise there of he's invested and they all should have and they didn't, and now he's going to be rich because they invested in this non-fat yogurt place, and of course Newman's there with his boys, just laughing about who knows what, probably on his 5th cup by the time we see him in the scene. And then, as obviously Jerry and Elaine, they start to gain a little bit of weight because Kramer doesn't hold back ever. He just says what's on his mind. So they put on some weight. So the whole premise of the show is them trying to figure out, okay, is this got fat in it? So they had to take it to the lab. And then, of course, Kramer, ladies' man that he is, right? Of course, has a little fling with the person, and then the whole thing. So, and then we also had the situation with Jerry using a bad word, which influenced, I think it was Meredith's son. So that spilled out there. So a lot going on beyond just the yogurt part of it. But any highlights to you for that? Any lines you love from that, or any scenes or anything like that really stood out to you? Because that's a very popular one as well.
Yeah, I think you kind of touched on my favorite parts of it with Newman and the other postal workers kind of sitting around eating it, and Newman, hey, another round of strawberry for me and my friends. And he kind of does that laugh, which if you look at that line on paper, it's not funny at all, but because it's Wayne Knight and Newman delivering it, it's hilarious. That one, and the Kramer looking at Elaine, whoa, you look like you put on 5-10 pounds, and that sort of thing. So those are probably the best food related parts of that episode. Of course, probably is most famous for airing just 2 days after the New York mayoral race ended that year. So they had filmed 2 versions of the episode so that it would cover it no matter which candidate won the election. So that was probably the thing that really stuck with it in the minds of most of the masses.
Yes, no, you said it very well. And I think, we all would love to hear that, right? Oh, this non-fat and let's, no sugar. Let's go for it. And just because in our minds we have this like, oh, we can have as much as we want because it had, like, for example, I know I didn't realize how much I enjoyed like the carbonated sort of the water, like bubbly and things like that. And I'm like, oh, this is great. There's 0 on the back of the can and everything is 0, 0, 0, 0. And so I had 3 or 4. And then I was like, wait a minute, I'm getting a little bloated here. What's going on? So in your head, you built these things up to be just free of anything bad. And then realize that too much of something is never going to be a good thing. So, as we continue on, again, I see a few more of you just jumped on. But one thing I want to ask about is the babka. So this episode here, and this is also regards to the dinner party. And so they have to go and they have to buy the babka, but then something happens to the babka. There's a hair in it, so they have to go get the cinnamon babka. Not as good. And then there's the black and white cookie. And it's funny. I do got to bring up with the black and white cookie, like I think I call it like the bow tie cookie or whatever. We had a good friend of mine on the show. He was one of the earlier guests. His name was Aaron Edwards Hall, comedian. Met him on a cruise ship, and he did a whole bit about the black and white cookie. Doesn't matter how many times you dunk that into milk, like nothing changes. It doesn't enhance anything. It's just, so he did a whole spiel on that. I thought that was hilarious. But so this whole episode, the other part of it is about the dinner party and like the thought that you have to show up with something. And so while Jerry and Elaine are off doing their thing, a whole mess ensues. And if you wouldn't want to share about that, what happens here with George and Kramer and the hot mess that their part of the evening turns out to, which doesn't bode well for the rest of the trip. But
yeah, George is just flabbergasted that you're expected to bring something if you're invited to a dinner party, and suggests that they should just bring ring dings and Pepsi, which is just appalling to Elaine. So they get sent off. Kramer and George get sent off to buy the wine. So it's this fun kind of split adventure sort of episode. We're going to get out of the apartment. We're going to have these two over here, these two over here. So just a great structure of an episode. Really enjoyable and memorable from that standpoint. But yeah, I mean, you talk about getting your food money's worth in that bakery where Elaine and Jerry are hanging out. And I think within a week or two of that episode, I had Jerry's line down, his reaction to Elaine when she suggests they'd be going in with lesser babka. And Jerry, I beg your pardon, cinnamon takes a backseat to no babka. People love cinnamon. We have tables in restaurants along with salt and pepper. Anytime anyone says, ooh, this is so good, what's in this? The answer invariably comes back, cinnamon, cinnamon, again and again. Lesser babka? I think not.
Perfectly said. And the cinnamon babka right now sounds amazing. I'm not going to lie. Thank you. There's 6 more of you just jumped in. Don't be shy. I see you there. Post something in the chat. So glad to have you on board. We are about halfway through in our food related Seinfeld episode chat this evening, part 2 of To Be Determined. Just having a good time. As we mentioned earlier, Darren is not available this evening, but we're having a good time. Mike and Mike just having a great conversation about all things Seinfeld food related episodes. So if you have any questions, anything like that, like I mentioned, throw it in the chat. So I wanted to talk about one episode about this with the Snickers bar with the fork and Mr. Pitt. So many layers to that too. But have you ever seen anybody use a fork and knife like that in a similar situation, like in your personal life, or is that a strictly Seinfeld related thing? I feel like I have, but then I haven't, so I'm not quite sure. But
yeah, I was gonna say, I'm dealing with like a particularly messy dessert or something that would normally be a hand thing. I feel like cupcakes these days, if you get a fancy enough cupcake, it's got too much frosting where you can't possibly get your mouth around it. So then maybe you need to take a spoon or a fork to get at it to kind of start with. But yeah, I wouldn't say in my normal life, although again, being as big a fan of the show as I am, when I was a kid and saw that episode, I absolutely did eat my Snickers bar with a knife and fork for a few weeks after that. It did not take long term, however. Afraid to say. So
to say, yes, it just seems like but of course it fit Mr. Pitt's character, and I love how it wasn't just Mr. Pitt. Like it was around, there was a scenes I think they showed quite a few different individuals doing. I think it was some of the Yankees office staff as well. By the way, I'd love to, in this sidebar, and we talked baseball before, but I'd love to have been in on the George Costanza interview to get hired by the New York Yankees. If there was a way to make that happen, if they had some, I don't know, that would just be, I mean, how would he even pull that off? But, so, but yeah, so in this episode, there's, like we mentioned, there's a new trend. Everyone's eating the finger foods with utensils, kind of madness, just to see that. So just wanted to point that out there, but I wanted to dive in. I wanted to move on to the junior mints. So much happened here. I don't even know where to start, but so the premise here is there's an operation going on, and Jerry and Kramer, they are able to watch the procedure. Jerry, he's there to actually watch the procedure. It looks like Kramer thinks he's at like the Cineplex watching his favorite movie, just relaxing and just like he's at home on the couch watching something. So he's chowing down on junior mints, and the one thing leads to another, and then the mint falls into the patient. So just kind of dive into this one a little bit, because this one was a lot of fun. I really enjoy when this episode comes through the loop on my end. So.
Yeah, I like to point to this episode when people try to say how ridiculous the premises were of some of the later season episodes, and I have to remind them that in season 4, we had a junior men fall into a patient. Season 5, we had a golf ball go into a whale's blowhole and these sorts of things. So it wasn't only in the later seasons where things got pretty crazy from a believability standpoint. But yeah, I mean, basically Kramer loves junior men so much that he can't believe that Jerry would actually refuse this junior mint. I mean, it's chocolate, it's peppermint, it's delicious. It's very refreshing. Yes, just
I love there's always one, because it's always funny with the attorney. There's always one, like, doesn't want to see Kramer, but there's always one hook that pulls him in, and then he's like sold every time. He falls for it every single time. Whatever mess Kramer gets into. So I enjoy that. But and so as this episode's going on, there's panic that the patient might actually like not make it because of this mint. And it's just everything ensues. And if I'm not mistaken, because Elaine was trying to get back with this particular person right before this whole thing, and then all of a sudden, am I right with that, or is that a different one?
You're exactly right. Well, she had heard that he was in the hospital, and she brings Jerry along to pretend to be the boyfriend until she sees he's lost a lot of weight, and then she's like instantly interested in him again. But then by the end of the episode, he has survived, and now he's just like slopping food in his mouth and talking with his mouth full, and now she's like, okay, I guess not. We'll get out of here. So,
what do you call it? He's like ready for a buffet right at this point. Yeah. So
where are we going for our big dinner?
Yeah. Yes. Now I want to also so a few more here we got to dive into before we go. So I want to talk about the calzones because we've all been there if we've worked in an office setting where you bring your lunch and it looks kind of pitiful. It's like brought this measly little sandwich, and someone in the office decides they're going to order out, and all of a sudden it sounds like a great idea. And so, what, let me get in on that. And so we've all kind of been there, but in this particular episode, George's got a calzone. And then George Steinbrenner sees the calzone. He wants to taste it and all this stuff. And all of a sudden now they're lunch buddies, and it has to be the eggplant calzone. But of course, with George, everything seems to go wrong. So if you want to kind of dive into that, because what started out as a nice little lunch between George and George there turns into another hot mess. So if you want to dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly like you said. So George gets himself in trouble because he'd already told Jerry about his issue that the guy had not seen him put the tip in the tip jar. And if they don't see you do it, it's basically like you're not doing it. You're not getting the credit for it. So he makes the mistake of, again, the guy doesn't see him do it. He makes the mistake of reaching back in so he can basically do the process over again. And then it appears that he's actually stealing the money, gets in big trouble, gets kicked out of the place. Enter Mr. Newman, who will, on his mail route, pick up these calzones for George so that he and Steinbrenner can stay lunch buddies, as you mentioned. And that whole situation where Newman, the mailman, apparently wasn't big on creeds because when it was raining, he would not be doing his mail route. So that put George in another bind, and the rest is history.
The rest is history. And we do have we'll pause on the food talk for just a second. We have a question that came in about your favorite character on the show and the one that you had to say that you didn't like as much.
Oh boy.
Okay. I know, open end.
Yeah, we're gonna start with, I guess we'll say co-favorites being Kramer and George, and it's just kind of what you're in the mood for on that day. Are you in for the typical George angst? Are you in for the physical comedy of Kramer? What part of it are you leaning toward? But I am going to give a shout out to, number one, I'm going to give a shout out to Elaine, who as a teenager growing up, I did not give enough credit to her in terms of how amazing of a job she was doing with her material. In these days now, I fully appreciate what she was doing with some of the material that she was given. So I'm going to say that first. Then I'm going to say that for as much crap as Jerry gets for not being an actor or being a non-actor, however you want to say that, to me, he did his job exactly the way he was supposed to do it for his role in the show. So I I'm going to say that they're all my favorite characters. Jerry's underrated, Elaine's underappreciated, and George and Kramer are always awesome. So that's I guess cheating a little bit if I'm getting down to it, but I really don't have a true favorite that just sticks out above the others.
Yeah,
because
it kind of depends on like what you're into that day, just because it's really hard to just pick. I mean, they're so dynamic, So, is there one? It could be a secondary. So one character that you just maybe not that you despise, but that wasn't connecting as well, maybe as the other ones or anything like that.
Okay, so I have one that came to mind in the marine biologist episode. Carol Kane plays the woman who gets hit in the head by the electronic organizer, and her performance didn't resonate with me personally at all. Like when I watch her scenes, it seems to me like, okay, I think this is supposed to be funny, but I'm not laughing. Like nothing about how she was performing was making me laugh. So as great as that episode ended, and as great as part of that episode is, I feel like those scenes with that character were really lacking to me. It just didn't strike me as funny at all, which is an unusual for me because I like every episode.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think if I had to pick, I think I get what they try to do with Susan. I think even too, like if I'm not mistaken, one of the reasons why with Susan not making staying longer on the show and her very odd character death was that there was just not real chemistry there. They didn't quite know what to. I feel like there was some substance to that. Not that she was a bad character. I just feel like they didn't really want to dive into it too much. And what I thought was funny was now it's hilarious material. You know how we can't George's world and we can't mix worlds and he can't bring her into this world because then the George won't exist. But you would think, though, the George character itself would want to not be like as much as he kind of despised her, even though he was engaged to her. You would think he'd want to be around others so to not have to be as much. That was kind of a weird thing, but it almost made it more funny that because of that. So I would say Susan, but not that I really disliked her. It's just I don't think there was enough chemistry there to make that work. So what I also wanted to ask about, so just a couple more here, the mutton. So if you want to dive into this episode a little bit, kind of share your thoughts on that. I am a big fan of food, but I don't think anything with the name mutton would ever be something that I'd be interested in, and that kind of whole plays into the whole episode here. So if you wouldn't mind sharing with those, I mean, I know what that episode's about, what that's talking about.
Yep, and kind of a standard Seinfeld setup where maybe something we didn't know about the character or really wasn't true of the character before, but it's going to be for this episode comes into play where Jerry is a salad eater all of a sudden. And that's kind of what he eats. And then so the thought of eating meat is kind of repulsive to him. But meanwhile, he's been set up with Elaine's cousin Holly, who is the meat eater of all meat eaters. And she's going to make pork chops and she's going to make mutton and all these different things. So it's this comical way of intertwining that with the other character in there, the wake up call guy who Elaine met, who has the dogs who then find the meat. So you've got all sorts of stuff going on there, but just the fact that the word mutton was used to the comedic effect it was pretty funny. They got a lot of good mileage out of the word mutton, even when Elaine was leaving at one point from the Holly's apartment. Says, thanks for mutton. It's just it is kind of a funny word to think of it.
And what was kind of funny, and I could be wrong, but I feel like too, because you mentioned the wake up call guy, I feel like it wasn't very many episodes removed. It might have been like really close. The episode with the Olympic
John Paul.
Yeah, I feel like that whole episode relating to the wake up for that was like very close in order with this one. So I just thought that was kind of an ironic thing.
Yeah, they were big on wake up call guys. That was the talk in the writers' room apparently through that stretch of the season.
Yes. Yep. And in the mutton episode too, they call it head to toe. So that whole thing. That was gold as well. And poor Grandma Mima and her napkins, and then the dogs chasing her down the road with the mutton in her pocket, and it was like you mentioned, the closing line. It's another great one. We had another question that come in and asked if we could chat about. So why not? It's on the list. So if we can ask about the eclair in the trash. So that's, I believe that episode. So it was actually called the Gymnast. But in this episode, so much happens. And George is actually like on the, this is one of his more, yes, as mentioned, one of the favorite episodes is when George is trying to convince that he's not homeless after he ate the trash eclair. But what I love too is this is an episode where George is looking pretty good, like for most of it. Like it was good George. It wasn't like, broke George or woe is me George. Like he's being very polite and very, respectful to the family and all that stuff. Nothing can go wrong. And then everything went wrong. So your thoughts on that, because obviously it's trash is trash. But just kind of share what your initial thoughts are with this whole experience, this whole part of the episode.
Yeah, it was one of those things. I kind of remember watching that episode live and thinking, well, this is kind of weird. Okay, he's just kind of in the kitchen by himself. This seems like a scene that doesn't have much potential to go anywhere. And then he's kind of looking in the garbage like, wait a minute, what's about to happen here? And he takes the bite out of that thing just as his girlfriend's mom walks in. And yeah, that was pretty funny. And then he's trying to convince her on the phone later. In my family, we used to leave out the trash all the time. It was no big deal. And of course, probably the most famous way he described it. It was kind of on top, hovering like an angel. just that George Costanza way of, hey, I can make this sound rosy one way or another.
Yes, and that wasn't where it ended for George, correct? Because that was the first apology, but there were two other ones, correct? Now, by the end of the third one, okay, forget it. But what else happened there? Because I feel like there was some other good stuff.
Yeah, so the second one, so we have him eating out of the garbage. The second one is he drinks some bad coffee and just kind of chucks it aside, not paying attention to the fact he throws it right on a car. The driver gets upset with him, so he walks over and cleans the windshield, so it looks like he's holding a cup for money while he's cleaning the window, and the mother sees him, of course, again, because she just happens to be there. And so that's strike two, as Jerry says, strike two. So we get that one, and then the last one, of course, after he sees the 3D art poster in the bathroom. And we had learned earlier in the episode that he takes his shirt all the way off when he goes to the bathroom, but he got so mesmerized by the poster, he forgot to put it back on, and he just walks out, and there's nothing left to do but put his hands in his pockets and just, yep, all right.
Well, yep, that's classic. And, and when he mentions that he takes his shirt all the way off, you're like, I can see that, like it's because it is who it is. And what was it called? So the last one that I really wanted to dive in here, again, there's so much. There's probably ones that we can't even get to today. But that's okay. But so I saw one comment in the chat a little bit earlier too about, and so I wanted to mention it, about the pretzels are making me thirsty, and the fun that was had by all trying to nail that line and who thought they would said it best. And so the premise here, Kramer gets a line in a Woody Allen movie, and his line are, these pretzels are making me thirsty. So he, all of a sudden, he's a movie star now. And so there's that whole thing. Then meanwhile, George gets into a mess because he's trying to fill in by moving cars, but then there's a car accident. Meanwhile, there's the movie getting filmed. And then I believe there was Chinese food trying to be delivered, correct, with that whole mess too. And so he was stuck in that, and the ambulance couldn't get there in time. Am I right with all that stuff?
Yeah, a lot going on because Elaine was dating the older guy who had a stroke, and the ambulance is trying to get to him. So what was great about that is not just the scene where they're all kind of giving their own take on the line and all kind of saying it, and of course George just screaming it out the window as people are honking their cars and stuff for the traffic that he's messed up. So they're all saying these pretzels are making me thirsty. What I really loved was that they came back and just had the characters kind of organically work that in. So when Jerry, that's also the episode where Jerry scolds the car reservation people for not they know how to take the reservation, they don't know how to hold it. But in that scene, he's frustrated. He's like, these pretzels are making me thirsty. And then Elaine, of course, when she's feeding, the old man's name is Owen. She's feeding Owen after he's had his stroke. And now she's breaking up with him. And she's just kind of laughing about it at the end. She's just, these pretzels are making me thirsty. It's just the way they organically work that in a couple more times, that kind of really sold it.
And just thinking about how they're just shoving these down his throat. The poor guy, like, oh, that's gotta be.
Who put cookies in his mouth? You're not supposed to do that.
I like my Yankee beans. It's in the chat. Yes. It's so good. And, I'm sure anyone that watches this while we're not live here, if there's an episode we didn't get a chat about, we want to know, go ahead and throw it in the chat. We will make sure. Future, I know Friday night, a lot of people got a lot of things going on, but feel free to put that in the comments. I'm sure there's so much more that we could have talked about relating to food. Got to stop somewhere. But we've covered so much here tonight. I want to end with, out of everything we've talked about on your list of food-related episodes, which one of the ones that we've covered tonight is your top episode related to food?
Sure. And yeah, if we're ranking purely on just the episode as a whole and not necessarily only the food elements, I would say out of the ones we talked about, the rye would probably be at the top of the list. To me, that's a top 15 episode for sure. I think you can make a top 10 case. The way that episode ends with George holding the rye on the fishing pole at the end while Susan and her parents catch him there, trying to get away with something. And then, of course, the way that they are able to obtain the rye, which was Jerry not being able to get it at the bakery, but of course having to mug poor Mrs. Mabel Choate on the street. Shut up, you old bag, and run away with it. I think that, to me, out of the ones that we touched on tonight, I would put that at the top.
And so I cannot believe I didn't mention this one sooner, so we may have to reorganize. Just remembered, of course, we didn't talk about the soup, and maybe that's a good thing because we got to end about the soup. So that's how we'll end it here. So many levels to this episode. We all know the crazy soup Nazi, and also with Banya and his meal that he's promised. And soup's not a meal, but then there's qualifications. Well, if it has crackers, so kind of give the listeners kind of a quick synopsis of this episode, which I probably guarantee is on the majority of the fans' top 3 episodes, or if not ranked top episodes, top 3 moments or quotes from the show.
All right, Mike. So I think what you've just done is you've done what happens sometimes in our brackets, and we have a little conflation with the soup and the soup Nazi because we talked a little bit about each one. So let me untangle this for everybody. So
yes, please do.
The soup aired in season 6. That was the first Banya episode ever, and that one to me hinges totally on this guy who Jerry is just annoyed with, and he can't believe he had to take this guy out to dinner just because he gave him a free suit and all this stuff. And then for the guy to have the audacity to say, you know what, I'm not that hungry. I'll just have some soup. We'll save the meal for another time. Just like, no, this is it. The soup counts. And just that was just, you really felt for Jerry, I think, in that moment.
You did. And what I love too,
on the right side.
None of his mannerisms affected Banya. He just kept at it. Like, it was just like, no matter what Jerry said, how angry he looked, he was just going to, and he's not the only character, and we can dive into that in later episodes, the comedian that he travels with, and just no matter what Jerry says, he's still, I just want to make sure you get home okay. So, we'll talk about it at a later time. But continue on with the difference in the episodes and stuff.
Yeah, so I'm just going to say too, we've been talking on our account, on the Seinfeld Scholars account, about episode titles lately, and the soup is one that I wish had been called The Meal instead of The Soup. And then that way, when we get to the Soup Nazi a season later, okay, we can have a very distinct, okay, and we're talking about the Soup Nazi here. We're talking about this meal episode with Banya over here. It's not the way it was, so we deal with it. But I love the fact that they brought Banya back for the Soup Nazi episode. I mean, that just makes total sense. It was a great touch to say, oh, let's have Banya be in the line for this soup place, because of course he loves soup, so of course he'd be there. Just perfect touch. Yep.
And how, and of course how ridiculous is the whole process to order the soup, and you gotta stand this way and you gotta move to your side, and let it go, George, that he didn't give you the bread. So and then you have the schmoopy, this whole schmoopy related situation when Jerry has to make that big life decision, Sophie's choice. Do you go with the soup or with schmoopy? And unfortunately schmoopy didn't make the cut, and we went with the soup there. So many parts of this episode, and he, credit to his character. I think he's still doing different cameos, I think it's called today, just from that, he's done other things as well, but just from that one experience alone really made his career. It was highlight of his career for sure. So, definitely. And a few more jumping on as we close down here. Yes, comments, the Soup Nazi, love it. There was one other message that came in that I just wanted to ask you. Okay. So it has nothing to do with food, but I still wanted to ask this question. So this is a show where it was mostly early on that this happened, but it is an interesting question. Someone asked, they couldn't make the show, but they wanted me to ask, when you have characters who start out as, for example, Jerry's parents, and then they make a change early on to somebody else, and then they stick with that. In this case, it was very early on season 1, and I'm not sure if the change was made in season 2 or not. But why do you think that happens in a show like this? Where is it just not connecting, or maybe they realize he made a bad choice here, and because they just go on with it and pretend that this is the person who's played this character the whole time. So
yeah, I think there's any number of real world reasons why those things happen, but I think the biggest thing is probably just you take who maybe is available the first time, thinking that maybe it's just going to be a 1 episode situation, or not really knowing that you're going to run 9 seasons at that point. And then once you realize you want that character to be a bit more of a presence, oh, well, now we need a different personality, a different actor to fill that role. So the Jerry Stiller stepping in and becoming Frank Costanza. And yes, Barney Martin becoming Morty Seinfeld after we got season 1 Morty just for 1 episode. So very similar situations for both of those. We got Lloyd Braun showed up a couple times with Matt McCoy playing him after original Lloyd took in the non-fat yogurt. That was original Lloyd Braun. So there are a few different instances we can point to. Mr. Lippman, there was an original Mr. Lippman as well before we got the Mr. Lippman who we all know and love, who eventually became a muffin top connoisseur. So you got plenty of instances of that in the Seinfeld casting world. And another topic for another day would be talking about the actors who played multiple roles on the show too. I think that would be a good one.
Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun. I'll pin that down for sure. And I don't want it to slip my mind, because I just had a thing I wanted to. It was a question that I wanted to ask before we close this down. And man, I think it just jumped. Let me give it just a second, because I hate to lose it, but it was a good one. Oh yes, if you could airdrop any other actor, like in the sitcom era or television show era, that to a Seinfeld episode, whether it is an existing episode or one that wasn't ever made, is there anyone that just comes to mind by character name on the show that would fit in perfectly in the Seinfeld series?
Oh wow, that's
like, I'll go first while you think about that.
Go ahead.
For me, I don't know how they would do it, but for me, it would be Joey's character Friends somehow having some sort of interaction with Kramer. I would love to see that in some kind of way, but I'm sure there's other ones, But is there any you could think of airdropped in?
That is such an interesting question, one I've never remotely even thought to think about. I'm thinking through of what other sitcoms I really was into at the time, and there were a bunch. I liked a bunch of them. I'm just not sure how many of them meshed with Seinfeld. Obviously, there were some New York-based ones. I was a Friends fan as well, Frasier fan, Cheers fan. Maybe a Cliff Clavin Newman meetup would have been interesting in some ways to see how these different postal workers related to the job and or how they maybe aren't always doing the job and that sort of thing. So I'm going to go with that one on short notice.
I'm sure. Okay. Yeah. I know it's hard to be put on the spot with that kind of question, but it popped in and I had to ask it. So, but thank you, Mike, so much for your time. This was a lot of fun. And shout out to, just wanted to give credit of all our recordings. We've done 36 recordings, not counting any of the lives. And shout out, Seinfeld Scholars was the most viewed of all our recordings. So it's a testament to what you are doing. Continue doing what you're doing. Even if I don't get to comment on every single one, I see everything that you're posting day in and day out. It's a lot of fun. Looking forward to the brackets again and just really enjoy it. It keeps the show alive, brings it to life. And so just want to say thank you for that and for being on with us. And I'm sure we'll be on again with the whole crew, and we'll have Darren with us as well, back again soon. So just want to say thank you. And again, thank you to National Tax Solutions. Until next time, everybody, we'll see you around the ballpark.